Greetings everyone, it is I am the one and only Lolo Bunny here, and I am from the likes of the Mexi Toys videos. And ladies and gentlemen, we'll present to you our next new Let's Play for the channel. Now you're probably thinking about the fact that, well, this game looks familiar, doesn't it? Well, it turns out it was actually a ROM hack game from the likes of based off from Mario Kart DS, and as you can tell, we are experiencing Pony Kart DS, which is basically it's like a My Little Pony mod for the Sacred Thief forms of based off from Mario Kart DS. And as far as we can definitely tell, for the fact that no matter what though, from the title screen alone, yes, I did manage to able to do this off screen by the way. And actually, as it turns out, I actually unlocked everything, just like the forms of how it does it back in sometime in 2016, all the way up to 2017, in regards to the forms of the original Mario Kart DS Let's Play, all thanks to both Piglet and Rarity already tackles for that game. However, there's going to be some slight differences here and there, which you'll find out as soon as we're able to actually dive into this. And there's also another thing else worth noting for actually, is that until 5 months time, that obviously though, the My Little Pony Friendship is Magic TV series is going to be celebrating the 15-year anniversary at some point on the 10th of October in 2025. So as a result though, yeah, this might be a perfect opportunity to able to actually experience this mod for the sake of the forms of, you know, Pony Kart DS, and it's usually been made by PG Pie, which, funnily, as far as I'm aware, that particular person also made a mod from the likes of the forms of a ROM hack, from the likes of the forms of Mario Kart 64 as well, called Pony Kart 64, except, well, obviously we can't get into that particular thing just yet, because we do need to figure something this out. So for the time being though, we're going to be playing through Pony Kart DS, which, again, if you remember from when we replayed Mario Kart DS before, obviously though it plays pretty much exactly the same as Mario Kart DS, but there are some slight differences, like you can still able to experience multiplayer within a wireless local multiplayer, and in addition to that, you can also able to check out the forms of Nintendo Wi-Fi connection, but despite the fact that the Nintendo Wi-Fi connection is no longer available, this means that we can't use that. So, and also we still got the records and options as well. But there's one mode exception to this, and that's what appears to be, if you couldn't tell from the bottom screen, there's no missions mode. So because of that though, my guess is about the fact that it might be hard to replicate the 3D models for the sake of the forms of certain villains from the likes of My Little Pony Friendship is Magic TV series, ranging from Lord T-Rex or Queen Chrysalis, or even especially noticeable with Cozy Glow as well. I mean, I'm also able to mention more about that if we somehow dive into this. So, because yes, today's date of course there is the 10th of May today, in some cases in 2025 today, and so much to the point for the fact that no matter what though, we've only just got about approximately 26 more days to go until Mario Kart World for the Nintendo Switch 2 is going to be releasing. So yeah, it's a true definition of the perfect opportunity to be able to actually tackle for this Let's Play for you guys. Especially noticeable it's going to be taking place in the weekends and stuff like that, usually in between both Saturdays and Sundays as well. So as you can tell, for the fact that as soon as we're able to dive into the Grand Prix mode, as you can see, that these mushrooms have been replaced by the forms of those muffins, which I'm pretty sure that could be something worth mentioning about the fact that these muffins are actually basically Derby's favorite food, or to be more specifically, that the other alternative name for Derby was actually muffins, so, because obviously she's so obsessed with the forms of muffins, you know? So, as you can tell for the fact that once you managed able to realize, much like the forms of how it does it in the actual Mario Kart DS game, obviously though you can able to still experience not only 50cc, but as well as 100cc, 150cc, as well as 150cc mirror. Although you still need to unlock it though, just like the forms of how it does it in the actual Mario Kart DS. So for the time being though, we'll go ahead and stick around with the forms of 150cc, just because I feel like at the end of the day, that 50cc was pretty slow, and as a result, it makes the actual video extremely lengthy. And as far as 100cc is concerned, it is alright for the actual speed and everything. So ultimately though, we always ended up choosing 150cc, because according to what Bugs Bunny did tell me about this, that 150cc was actually much faster, so either way. Now, in terms of the character roster, if you couldn't tell, much like the forms of how it does it in the actual Mario Kart DS game, you're able to actually experience 12 playable characters. Well, when you first start the game, you're able to actually get 8 characters unlocked from the start, but then you unlock the other 4 when it comes to likely trying to proceed into Grand Prix, which, as you can tell, that rather than trying to select Mario, Luigi, Peach, Yoshi, Toad, and Donkey Kong, Wario, Bowser, Daisy, Dry Bones, Waluigi, and Rob the Robot. So instead, those characters have been replaced by the forms of the rest of the My Little Pony characters based off on the Friendship is Magic series. Because get it, because you know, Friendship is Magic is way more popular these days compared to the forms of how it does it for Generation 5, because I will still have to admit it right away, G4 is actually the best generation ever, whilst compared to Generation 5, I don't know, it's hard for me to go back into Generation 5 now just because, well, Generation 5 to me sucks. So either way, aside from the movie, but aside from that, that's as far as I can try to able to describe about. So anyways, in terms of characters wise, we've got Twilight Sparkle, Rarity, Pinkie Pie, Fluttershy, Spike the Dragon, and Applejack, Rainbow Dash, Discord, and alongside with that, there's also 4 unlockable characters as well, ranging from Starlight Glimmer, Derpy, and Trixie, and finally, the most interesting out of the lot though, and that's what appears to be DJ Palm 3, as you saw familiar. So either way, and by the way, I love the fact that with all these different characters do have their own unique cart designs. Like, for example, there's the Rarity one right there, although mind you, I was going to show you guys briefly for a moment, but basically though, it's about the fact that each and every single pony characters do have their own unique cart designs. Like, for instance, there's a swan-looking cart for Rarity, because obviously, if you remember from that particular episode called The Carts Before the Ponies, usually in Season 6, basically though, she actually utilized the forms of the swan cart, which is actually pretty cool. And in addition to that, we also got ourselves another one of those examples being in Twilight Sparkle's case, that she does have her RC vehicle, which is almost like it's inspired by one of those merchandise for the toys. So yeah, that's actually quite interesting. And meanwhile, we've also got the log roller for the likes of Fluttershy right there. And basically though, as you can see on screen, that she also has Angel Bunny to join in too. So either way though, that's actually pretty cool. Although, aside from all that stuff though, as you can tell, that we've already unlocked everything, as I mentioned this before. And basically though, unlike the forms of how it does it on the actual vanilla version of Mario Kart DS, the amount of cards you're able to select, which appears to be a grand total of 36, whilst in this particular ROM hack, if you couldn't tell, we're going into 31 maximum amount of cards. So because of that though, yeah, you might able to expect to realize about that. So now in terms of those cups though, obviously we still have the usual 4 main cups from the likes of in the actual Mario Kart DS game. Like, we can still able to experience Mushroom Cup, Flower Cup, Star Cup, and Special Cup. And I'm pretty sure about the fact that the majority of the tracks on those cups are basically exactly the same as the forms of how it does it in the Mario Kart DS game. But there's actually a noticeable difference if you couldn't tell, and that's what appears to be for the fact that the majority of those retro cups have been replaced by the forms of the specifically Pony Grand Prix cups, which appears to be 4 of one of those elements of harmony kind of represented for. Like, for instance, we got ourselves the Apple Cup, and in addition to that, we also have the Party Cup, and in addition to that, there's also the Dash Cup, and finally the Magic Cup. So as a result, though, it's about the fact that it's almost like an element of honesty, element of laughter, and element of loyalty, and of course, element of magic. So, unfortunately, no element of kindness or element of generosity. So yeah, you can get the idea for this point. So either way. Now, here's the thing though, I was originally trying to able to actually go into the main cups first, and then we'll save the other 4 cups for later. I'm actually going to be going onto the opposite side this time, because obviously though, the most interesting part about this is though, in terms of this ROM hack anyway, that in addition to able to actually have ourselves 16 Mario Kart DS racetracks, we also got 16 other tracks based off from the universe of the My Little Pony Friendship is Magic environment. So, for example, the first track we're going to be going to in terms of the forms of the Apple Cup, and that's what appears to be Ponyville Circuit, which obviously though is going to take place in Ponyville. So yeah, that's actually quite interesting, all things considered. So, and obviously the first character we're going to be choosing for this Let's Play anyway, and that's what appears to be none other than Fluttershy, because let's face it, Fluttershy, she's so adorable. So anyway, so yeah, let's get into the actual gameplay of this ROM hack of Pony Kart DS. It plays miraculously, it plays exactly like the forms of how it does it in Mario Kart DS. However, the coolest thing about it though, to me though, is that several characters have their own unique voices. Well, to be more accurate though, some voice clips are heavily borrowed from the likes of the actual TV series, which is of course My Little Pony Friendship is Magic, and still, we are the bronies of course, so yeah, don't judge me about that. So, I digress. So, I will admit it though right away, it's kind of hard for me to go back into Mario Kart DS these days, because I'm still pretty much more accustomed to the forms of, you know, Mario Kart 8 Deluxe thanks to the forms of the Boosticles Pass DLC, and also as far as I'm aware, the music track we're going to be hearing in this particular course is obviously based off from Donut Plains 1, just because obviously though, Donut Plains 1 did or already came back in Mario Kart DS, but the ultimately though is about the fact that, well, it's hard for me to explain about this particular subject really, just because no matter what though, it has been quite some time since we actually last did done some of our commentaries and what have you, so either way though, and of course, as you can see on the actual green shell sprite, it looks kind of different, doesn't it? Well, this is mainly because several items in the forms of this ROM hack has been altered slightly, and there's also some replacements here and there as well, such as for instance though, that usually for the sake of the forms of the bullet bill item, for example, rather than just trying to turn into the forms of the bullet bill, so instead you're able to actually turn into Princess Celestia, which is actually kind of interesting. And meanwhile, in terms of the forms of another item, which appears to be Blooper, like, the Blooper was being replaced by a Parasprite, which is actually kind of interesting. And as far as I'm aware, is that as you can tell from certain shells, usually for the sake of the forms of the green shell as well as the red shell, even not so much the blue shell, just because the 3D model plays out exactly the same as the actual Mario Kart DS game, but as far as I'm aware, in terms of the forms of both the red shell and the green shells, they're all basically based off from the actual familiar shell from the likes of Tank, which appears to be Rainbow Dash's pet companion. So, yeah, that's actually kind of strange, but hey. Anyways, the next stage we're going to be hop into, or should I say the next course we're about to be going into, that's what appears to be Sweet Feather Pass. So, yeah, I'm very curious to know how this stage actually plays out to be. So, I digress. So, yeah, anyway, and there's also another thing else I would like to explain to you all, is that, well, suffice to say, that recently though, Gex Trilogy, for not only for PlayStation 5, at least as far as I can recall, but alongside with the forms of the Nintendo Switch, obviously though, Gex Trilogy was expected able to have already been confirmed the actual release date for it, which is going to be yet another compilation game is going to be on its way, except this time it's going to be focuses around Gex himself. So as far as I'm aware, the actual compilation itself is going to be releasing during the forms of on the 16th of June. So that's going to be roughly about on the second half in terms of the forms of June. So relatively speaking, I was about the fact I'm still very curious to check that particular compilation of these games out. Well, alongside with the forms of certain Bobcat out there, which appears to be Bubsy, but I think I highly doubt it at this point, just because I've heard so many horrifying things about the forms of Bubsy the Bobcat, especially before that particular, you know, the most atrocious game out of the bunch, which is of course Bubsy 3D for the PlayStation. So, because as far as I do already heard about, thanks to the forms of Maxi did somehow point it out, ever since the journey forms of in yesterday's Paper Mario video, which, speaking of which, he might actually decide able to take a break on that game for a little while, until he decide able to come back into the game, during at some point until, you know, next month and stuff like that. So, And by the way, something's worth noting for the music track of this stage, as far as it's currently playing right now, the actual music track is obviously going to be based off from Choco Island 2, from the likes of the forms of one of those retro tracks in Mario Kart DS. Well, to be more specifically, yeah, Choco Island 2. So because of that though, yeah, that's something worth noting for. And as far as I'm aware, that I really do love about the fact that they did somehow manage to able to bring in some of the coolest track layouts and stuff like that. So relatively speaking, it makes everything else a little bit interesting, to say the least. So, but I digress. So far so good anyway, especially concerning for that particular point it's worth noting for, that Rainbow Dash almost tried to catch up to me. So, anyways, now let's move on to the next track, which appears to be Snowtop Breeze, which is going to take place in the skies above, with some snowy mountains every once in a while. So either way, and as far as I can recall, the music track they did somehow choose for this track, and that's what appears to be based off from Crappy Snowland, from the likes of the forms of Mario Kart 64 retro track. So yeah, because obviously that was about the fact that we're just at first glance managed able to drive onto the snowy mountains at first glance. So yeah, let me know in the comments down below for the question of the day. Have you guys ever played Pony Kart DS before, as far as the forms of ROM hack is concerned? Because for my first experience of this game was actually very positive, because obviously though it plays miraculously, plays very similar to the forms of how it does it in the actual Mario Kart DS game, but with Ponyfied. So because of that though, makes sense concerning for the fact that obviously Generation 4 is actually way more popular back in the day, especially that a lot of bronies out there, myself included, always keep on talking about the forms of specifically My Little Pony Friendship is Magic, just because Friendship is Magic is still without doubt the greatest shows ever. I mean, it's not perfect in the end, just because there are certain episodes are pretty hit and miss sometimes, usually for the majority of Season 8, I will admit to though right away. I mean, relatively speaking, I was about the fact I just love any other aspects, aside from few issues I have with the forms of certain episodes these days, so I digress. So, and it's also reassuring about this as well, that as you can tell, there's no Lakitu in here either, just because no matter what though, every time whenever you do manage to fall off the track, the Lakitu does not even show up either. So because of that though, it's all just a part of the forms of how the fact that certain parts have been absent, or in some cases, some parts have been replaced. So yeah, you can get the idea for this point. So either way, now as far as the other things I would like to point out is about the fact that, like I said before, that this particular ROM hack, unfortunately though, does not have missions mode, because as far as I'm aware, that it's hard to actually make everything else entirely in 3D when it comes to like handling the forms of several bosses for several 3D models. Such as, for instance though, I don't think it's possible we can able to actually see several bosses based off on the likes of the forms of, let's just say, Lord T-Rex, or Queen Chrysalis, or Cozy Glow for that matter. So yeah, you can get the idea for this point. So yeah, I do really understand why they somehow not including missions mode this time. So I think this particular Let's Play itself is going to be slightly shorter in comparison to the forms of how it does it on the actual Mario Kart DS Let's Play back in 2016/2017 respectively, thanks to, you know, both Piglet and Rarity, from what I've heard anyway. So anyway, so let's get into the forms of the final track in terms of the forms of the Apple Cup, and that's what appears to be Sweet Apple Acres, which obviously it's a, you know, a massive home place for the sake of Applejack herself. So because of that though, and the music track they did somehow choose for this track, and that's what appears to be Moo Moo Farm from the likes of Mario Kart 64 as well. So it makes sense, considering for the fact that, you know, Sweet Apple Acres is almost like a farm countryside kind of vibes to it, and also if you pay attention well enough, on specifically in the beginning portion of the track, there's actually that particular cameo of not only Scootaloo, but as well as the forms of Apple Bloom and Sweetie Belle as well. Although, if you are a massive fan with the forms of the Cutie Mark Crusaders, unfortunately though you can't play as them, just because obviously though, as you can tell, they're on the actual background of the entire racetrack. And it's also worth noting for too, there's also the Cutie Mark Crusaders clubhouse at the back, or in the background I should say. So either way, chances are though is about the fact that we might able to actually see some familiar background characters every once in a while, especially considering for the fact that, like I said before, this game has 12 playable characters, much like the actual Mario Kart DS game. However though, here's the thing though, I haven't exactly tested this out for myself about the phones of the multiplayer aspect, just because obviously though I couldn't figure out how to able to actually sort out the wireless connection thing. So either way, maybe I'll try to do it on my spare own time, but not now anyway. So either way, so that pretty much does it for the first cup in terms of the forms of this ROM hack. So yeah, I'm actually very impressed about this so far, especially because, well, despite not every single aspect about this mod is perfect, by the way, because as soon as we get into the forms of the award ceremony, as you can tell, there are some technical issues, such as for instance though, we came in first place, and as you can see, the cart is missing for Fluttershy. So because of that though, it feels like that Fluttershy was actually going to be driving an invincibility car, which obviously reminds me of so much of the forms of one of those episodes from SpongeBob SquarePants or something, or to be more accurate though, Megamind for the actual film itself. So either way, so yeah, we got ourselves our glorious 3-star ranking. So yeah, despite the trophy itself is basically unchanged, so oh well, beggars can't be choosers. So with that being said folks, is that we get endings up this point right here. So join me next time for more of Let's Play of Pony Kart DS, basically a ROM hack of Mario Kart DS. Is that we're going to be moving on to the next cup, which appears to be the Party Cup. So this will be fun, and I'll see you guys until tomorrow. Later fellas.